In this first module, we're going to look at the Marquee tool. The Marquee tool is used for making selections. So we have the rectangle and we have the elliptical. I'm going to go ahead right now and set it to elliptical. If you look at the artboard here, I have my shortcuts. These are the shortcuts that I'm going to use inside of this video. So they're here. Also at the bottom for PC and Mac. I'm working with the PC, so you're going to hear me say Alt or Shift and Alt, Control Alt. But for Mac, it's Options for Alt and Command for Control. So I'm not going to repeat that each time I use it. It's just going to be here on the artboard. So if you're working with a Mac, just know that when I say Alt, I mean Option for Mac. When I say Control, I mean Command for the Mac. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. For the selection, so this is a circle, so I'm going to work with the elliptical tool. So I'm going to select somewhere on the screen here, drag across the part, and then I'm going to resize it. And one of the first things we can do is the space bar. If I hold down the space bar, it allows me to move the selection. So if I want to line it up the way I want to, and I let go of the space bar, allows me to continue sizing it. Press and hold, move it. When I have my selection, I let go, and now I have my selection. Okay. Another thing I can do, let's do this again. You can see that right now, if we were to zoom in, you can see that my width is 518. If I just press the Alt, it doubles the size. So it takes the selection. So whatever the selection is, so if I come here, click outside of here, I'm at 437, press the Alt, 837. And while I'm holding this, I can still press and hold the space bar and move it. Here is, now how do you decide where to place this cursor when you want to drag across something? So we can look at the guidelines. Let's bring some guidelines in so we can kind of get an idea of how I'm deciding where to place that cursor when I get ready to make my selection. All right. So with the round, we have the four edges here. And when I'm looking at making the selection, what I'm doing is that to be convenient, I'm going to go to the top, to the most top, and to the left-hand side of the image. Press and hold, drag. Scroll to the bottom of the image and to the most right side of the image and let go, and it makes the selection. So that's how you determine where you want to make your selection. If we want to deselect, we just hit Control D to deselect the selection. Another thing we can do, if I want to, this is a circle, so if I wanted to, I could scale from the center. All right. So another thing we can do, we can scale from the center of our selection. So if I wanted to, I can go to the center of my pizza, press and hold, and Shift Alt and drag, and you can see the selection drags from the center. And again, I can press and hold my space bar to move it. Once I make the selection, let go of the mouse, and we have our selection. Now, the main thing is what do we do with this selection? One thing we can do is that if I make this selection, let's go here. Now the question is, what do we do with the selection? So I'm going to go ahead and make my selection here. I'm going to hold down the space bar, move it. Okay, so I have my selection, and now what is it that I want to do with it? Now I can do a cut or copy. I can cut the selection from the image and move it. So you can see I've cut the image from the selection. And it doesn't put it on a new layer. It keeps on the layer. So now this is, if I hit Control D to deselect, select my move key, you can see that this is the image, right? Okay, so I'm going to undo all of that. So that is holding down the control, that's the cut. For the copy, what I'm going to do is go Control Alt, and you can see I get the black arrow and the white arrow, and that creates a copy. Okay. Again, it maintains it on the layer. So now we have a new image with the two pieces like this. The third thing that we can do is that we can create this selection and place it on a new layer. And this is primarily what we're going to do. So what I'm going to do is hit this Control J. And you can see now my pizza is on a new layer. Okay. And we can move it around, do anything we want with it. Okay. But let's take a look at a couple of things here. I'm going to zoom in, and to zoom for the shortcut, hold down the Control and space bar, and they give you the magnifying glass where you can zoom in and out. All right, you see we got a nice solid line here, and that's fine in some cases, but in a lot of cases what I want is something to blend a little better. So I want to feather my selection. So I'm going to go back to, I'm going to hide this, and I'm going to make this selection again, and this time I'm going to select from the center. Okay. So I've selected for this from the center, but this time what I want is I want to feather this layer. So I want it to blend better into the background. So I'm going to go to Select, Modify, and Feather. And I'll go with the 6 pixels. Hit Control J. And just so we can see the difference, we're going to add a solid color layer behind this. So I don't want that stark. Let's just go with this green. So now I'm going to turn on both my pizzas, and you can see right. And we're going to look here. You can see how the blending for the layers, the difference in the blending, right? And again, this is one of those things where you could just fix this up if you wanted to, but you can see now that maybe instead of 6, we went with 4 for the feather. But again, it's a matter of blending better into the background. Now that we have that, all right, so now let's go ahead and turn on, let's turn that piece off. All right, now we want to make a selection of this. All right, and I am going to again feather it. Not as much. I'm going to feather it a little bit. I'm going to say just 2. Okay. Create a new layer, and I'm going to fill it with black. Okay. So to fill the background, so to fill it with the foreground color, you press Alt and Backspace, and that will fill it with the foreground color. Control D to deselect. Okay. I'm going to turn on my pizza. I'm going to resize it. Control T to resize. All right. So get it there, and then I'm going to create a clipping mask. So I'm going to press and hold the Alt, move the cursor between layers 3 and 2, and click and create a clipping mask. And now layer 2 is inside of this window, so we can resize this image all we want, and it will maintain that size. And what we can do, if I can get this in the center, if we look here, there's an anchor. So this is my transform anchor, and what that means is that the rotation, if I rotate this pizza, it rotates around the anchor. If I move that anchor to, let's say, over here, and then rotate, you can see it rotates around wherever the anchor is. All right. So I'm going to put that back in the center. Also, if we want to scale, I scale. If I press and hold the Alt key and drag the corners, it scales about the anchor point. All right. So we'll put it like that. And there it is. We have our pizza inside of our teacup. Okay. So real quick lesson. I will provide these 3 images for you to practice. Okay, that's it. We've placed our pizza inside of our teacup. And now we're going to move on to part 2 of the Marquee tool.